Thank you for joining us this morning. Welcome to the program. U.S. President Joe Biden is set to meet Finland's President Sauli Niinisto and Sweden's Prime Minister Magdalena Andersson in Washington today to discuss their NATO membership bids. Well, the U.S. is backing both countries' efforts to join the Western Defense Alliance. If they succeed, NATO will grow to 32 members. White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan told reporters that the meeting with the Finnish president and Swedish prime minister will allow the three nations to coordinate on the path forward and compare notes on the move. The two Nordic countries made applications in the light of Russia's invasion, drawing warnings from Kremlin that the move would not bring stability to Europe. Turkey is opposing the two countries' applications, accusing them of harboring anti-Turkish extremists. But the UK and several other NATO nations have offered security assurances to Finland and Sweden while their applications are considered, pledging to assist them in the event that they face aggression. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has met with Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu at the United Nations as the United States kicks off its presidency of the Security Council with a series of meetings addressing global food security. On Ukraine, Blinken says there's a lot on the common agenda, including Russia's ongoing aggression against Ukraine. The United States, Turkey, and all of their allies have been resolute in support of Ukraine, and they want to see this Russian aggression come to an end. Mr. Blinken will chair a ministerial meeting focusing on strengthening global food security, nutrition, and resilience.
Today, we had Finland and Sweden submit their applications, and this, of course, is a process, and we will work through that process as allies and as partners. We have a lot on our common agenda, including, of course, Russia's ongoing aggression against Ukraine. The United States, Turkey, all of our allies have been resolute in support of Ukraine, and we want to see this Russian aggression come to an end. I'm grateful for the solidarity that we've shown, that Turkey has shown in that effort. There are many other challenges that we're dealing with together, and maybe some opportunities, including in the South Caucasus. We'll have an opportunity to talk about that. And we want to talk about continuing to strengthen and build on our economic relationship.
After our pull aside in Berlin on the occasion of NATO informal ministerial, and always pleasure to discuss bilateral relations and the regional and global issues with you directly. Therefore, I'm very happy that we are going to convene the first strategic mechanism ministerial today as well. Of course, we will focus on our bilateral relations, and we are aiming to overcome the differences through dialogue and diplomacy. And there are areas that we need to also pay attention or focus to further deepen our bilateral relations and cooperations. And you mentioned trade. Yes, we aim to reach $100 billion trade volume, and the increase in 2021, despite the pandemic, actually made us more hopeful to reach that target.
U.S. President Joe Biden's top national security officials say they unanimously support Finland and Sweden's bids to enter NATO, seeing them as strong military partners. Well, Biden's national security advisor Jake Sullivan says that the team supports the entry of Finland and Sweden into the NATO alliance on the grounds that they have already proven themselves as highly capable security partners.
President Biden posed the question to his national security team, to his cabinet principals who cover national security, as to whether they supported the accession of Finland and Sweden, and for them to consider the risks as well as the benefits of bringing Finland and Sweden into the alliance. Unanimously, President Biden's national security team emphatically supported the entry of Finland and Sweden into the NATO alliance on the grounds that they have already proven themselves as highly capable security partners. In the parlance, we say net security contributors, meaning they give a heck of a lot more than they take when it comes to a security partnership or an alliance, and that we believe that Russian aggression has only reinforced the argument for the kind of defensive alliance that NATO presents and poses. And finally, we have the principle of the open door. And the open door says that if countries meet the criteria of NATO membership and display that they can be net contributors to the alliance and to overall European security, they should be admitted. That is a principle that President Biden has believed since long before he occupied the Oval Office. And Finland and Sweden are two cases that are pretty clear-cut when it comes to meeting those terms.
Philip Loscombe is a policy advisor at Rasmussen Global. He joins us virtually from Copenhagen in Denmark. Welcome to the program, Philip. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, given NATO membership applications by Finland and Sweden, did Russia miscalculate in launching the invasion of Ukraine?
Yes, I think that is evident by now. Russia and Vladimir Putin in particular have massively miscalculated the consequences of the invasion. In a very short time, Putin has now managed to extend NATO's borders with Russia by more than 1,300 kilometers. Finnish and Swedish NATO membership will essentially mean that NATO will almost surround the entire Baltic Sea. And this will greatly enhance NATO's defense of the Baltic region. And it also reduces the chances of a Russian assault across both the air, land, and the sea domains. We also have to remember that Sweden and Finland have both structured their defense capabilities according to NATO standards, which Jake Sullivan also mentioned. Finland has a wartime military strength of 280,000 soldiers, with 870,000 men and women in reserves. So Russia will also have to divert more troops to protect the area bordering Finland. And also, by the way, if we look to the high north, in the Arctic, which is also a strategic priority to Russia, Russia is now the only non-NATO member of the Arctic Council. And here in Denmark, where I'm based, we're having a referendum on June 1st on our defense opt-out, on the security and defense dimension of the European Union. So, and then I haven't mentioned the increased defense spending and the cut of Russian energy supplies to Europe. All in all, I believe that the Russian invasion of Ukraine will go down as one of the large strategic blunders of the 21st century.
Well, Philip, NATO's membership still takes a bit of time, because all current members must unanimously agree for it to happen. What do you think? Could Russia consider taking military action against either Finland or Sweden?
Well, the short answer is no. Of course, when it comes to Putin, I don't want to exclude anything, but I don't think that Russia will take a military action against Finland and Sweden. First of all, Russian forces are simply just stretched too thin right now. They simply don't have the bandwidth to open a new front line against another opponent. Secondly, I believe that the reaction from military attack on Finland and Sweden would exceed what we've seen in Ukraine. You have to remember that both Finland and Sweden are EU member countries and with close relations to the US. And now they also have security guarantees. So, there's basically not a lot that Putin can do about it. And besides, the reaction from the Kremlin has been quite mild, if we look at the facts. Of course, they complain this was expected, but they seem to accept the political decision. However, I think that where they'll draw the red line is when it comes to NATO forces, NATO capabilities, and in particular NATO nuclear capabilities being deployed on Swedish and Finnish soil. But that is something that's a question, I think, that's further into the future.
Well, how do you think Ukraine will be feeling right now that it appears its own application is stalled, yet these other countries are being welcomed with open arms?
Well, I think that Ukraine will welcome the development. Ukraine knows that it will not achieve NATO accession in any near future. Zelensky has also openly said that. And it was only a week ago that Zelensky praised Finland's willingness to apply for NATO membership. I also want to stress again that this really illustrates the strategic miscalculation on the part of the Kremlin. It makes Putin's life more difficult. And I think it's fair to say that anything that strengthens Western unity is in the interest of Ukraine.
Now, on the ground, how would you describe the situation on the ground in Ukraine?
I mean, the short answer is that things are still not going as Putin would have liked. His blitzkrieg, of course, did not go according to plan. And even after Russia shifted focus towards the east and the south, advances have more or less lost momentum. Russian forces reportedly suffer from low morale, lack of equipment, and we are seeing strong Ukrainian defenses in the Donbass region holding for now. Russians are being pushed further out from Kharkiv, and several other attacks have been repelled. Actually, I read a report, I think it was from the British Ministry of Defense, which actually said that Russia has lost a third of the ground forces that it committed in the beginning of the invasion by now. So this really speaks to sort of the failure that this operation has been for Putin. Now there are also reports that Putin is involving himself quite deeply in tactical and operational decisions. I mean, this includes where troops should move. And these are the kind of decisions that would normally be taken by colonels or brigade commanders, not by presidents. And we also have an abundance of historical examples of what happens when presidents try to take, or the political establishment try to take control of what is essentially a military professional matter. So I think this also says something about how frustrated the Kremlin and Putin in particular is with the progress of the war.
Oh, finally, Philip, you know, there are other countries who have applied way before Ukraine and certainly before Sweden and Finland. I mean, talking about countries like Albania and North Macedonia. Obviously, they will be watching all these closely. Can you gauge their possible reactions and how this might perhaps affect European security in the future?
Well, I mean, first, let me say that NATO doesn't just enlarge from one day to another. It has some technical criteria that have to be met. Sweden and Finland are so aligned with NATO that they meet these criteria straight away. Again, this was also what Jake Sullivan stated at the press conference. So, I mean, accession of Finland and Sweden does not mean that other countries will get rapid accession. In particular, there are many countries with unresolved border problems, disputes and territorial conflicts, and NATO and the NATO members do not want all this spilling into their organizations. This also goes for the EU, by the way. This has also been part of Putin's calculations, I believe. I mean, when he took Crimea, when he destabilized Donbass, occupied Transnistria and Moldova, and so on and so forth, it's all because he wants to establish a number of simmering conflicts in the neighborhood that prevent these countries from entering NATO or the EU. But we also have to maintain that NATO has an open door policy and Putin is not the doorman. I mean, so in principle, countries like Albania, North Macedonia, Ukraine, Georgia, they all have the opportunity to become NATO members and apply for membership. And sort of this very principle was indeed part of the dispute between NATO and Russia prior to the war. So, I mean, in principle, all these countries have the opportunity to apply, to join, but I think that lies somewhat into the future. And there are, as I said, a number of technical criteria that Sweden and Finland just have an easier time fulfilling.
All right then, Philip Luscombe, Policy Advisor at Rasmussen Global. Thank you for speaking to us.
Thank you for having me.